Hello, today I am going to show you how to bind your own Coptic stitch sketchbook. This is one of the easiest ones. I really like this one because the pattern, the stitching pattern, is very repetitious. We use this with our students during the pandemic because it was very easy to send the materials home with them and watch a video as well to do this stitch. There's no gluing required, so it made it very easy to send materials home. So you don't need a lot. You'll need scissors to cut your string, and you can use embroidery floss. This is just a cotton, brown cotton natural thread. You can use yarn. You can use like weft thread for weaving. I have two pieces of old mat board here that I'm going to use for my covers. You can use old tag board. You can use folders, old folders. That makes perfect tag board. You could just use a color sheet of paper. Fancier, if you want to use an old piece of leather, you can do that too. You can use any kind of paper you want as well. So I here have recycled the packing material from some things that I've gotten in the mail and just cut them down to the size that I want. You can use regular drawing paper. You can use regular printer paper. So what you're going to do is, however many sheets that you want, your very first step is going to be folding each one of these sheets individually so that you have a very good crease. So I've already folded my papers. So you fold your papers. I just take my fingernails and kind of go like that. If you have a bone folder, you can do that. Or I use the end of my scissors here to also get a very good crease. So once you have all of your papers folded, you are going to put them together in signatures. And the signatures have 5 sheets together. All right, so you don't want any more than that, otherwise it's going to be a little cumbersome to try to poke the holes and to start stitching with those. So what I'm going to show you today is kind of the cheater method, so you don't have to do any measuring. We are going to poke 4 holes in each one of our signatures. So I have done that with some of my signatures here. So what I'm going to do is use one of my papers here from one of the signatures that I've already poked my holes. So there's really no need to measure. If you want to measure, you can. But what I make sure of is when I do draw my holes here first, I'm going to make one a little closer to the one edge of the paper and one a little bit further in. What's nice about making these two different on the sides here, so like if this comes in a 1/2 inch and this comes in an inch, you're going to just center the two in the middle here. And once we start stitching, it's really easy to make sure that you have your signatures in the right order. So you'll see what I mean when we start stitching. So what you're going to do then is you're going to take this piece of paper as your dummy, and in each one of your signatures, you're going to open it up to the middle page, and you can use a couple of different things to poke your holes. What we do with the kids is we quite literally just have a bunch of T-pins laying around. So you can have a little bit bigger one here. The smaller ones work just fine. If you have an awl and you would like to use that, you're more than welcome to. It's definitely more comfortable to hold on to. I'm just going to show you how to poke the holes with my T-pin. And then when we start stitching, we have tapestry needles. So these are the needles that we used when we're in the classroom. And what we did is to send these home, because we didn't think we'd be getting some of these back, we just ordered a package of 100 of the plastic ones. I believe it was on Amazon. I think the pack was $6.99. So 100 needles to send home to the kids to keep. And I'll show you how to use the plastic one as well. Unfortunately, the kids didn't listen and there was a lot of breakage, but I'll show you how, if you want to do this with your kiddos, to hold it really nice and high up so you can poke that hole and get it nice and big. So each one of your signatures, you are going to take and put your first page here inside, so folded kind of like a book here. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your T-pin here and you're going to poke down and out. So each hole is going to be down and out. And I'll show you what it looks like on this side here. So down and out. So that actually comes out then on the top of your crease here. And then what I like to do to make it easier for stitching, you can take your metal tapestry needle or you can take your plastic one, and you're going to re-poke those holes down and out just like we did with the T-pin so that it widens that hole so it's a little bit easier to stitch inside and out. So you're going to do this for every signature. So I have most of my signatures done. I have 2 left here to show you that it's going to be the exact same process, that you're going to open all of your pages to that center page, making sure that you have that crease nice and tight in the center there, and taking your T-pin, poking in the exact same place again, down and out, down and out, down and out, and down and out. So if you have really nice tables, then you want to make sure you have some kind of like cardboard or cutting mat or something down. This is just my drafting table, so it's used to having arting happening on top of it. All right, so with my T-pin, I poke that. I'm going to poke my holes a little larger, holding very high up on my needle here so that this is easier to stitch. And you're going to do this same process for all of your signatures. So each signature is going to have 5 pages in it, and you can have as many or as little signatures as you want. So I'm just going to take then my first page and put it on my original signature here. And so now when I put my signatures together, you can see that all of my holes line up. And if there were any that were off, because we measured a little differently on each end, you can tell immediately that those holes don't line up. So that's going to be your first catch when you start stitching these together. So if you are doing any kind of decorating on your covers, you are definitely going to want to do any kind of painting or covering. If you have like wrapping paper and you want to glue that down and wrap that around, you definitely want to do that first. And you are going to poke your holes in your cardboard as well, because we are going to stitch the first signature and the cardboard together first. So what I like to do, this is the easiest thing to do, and you can see I already have my holes poked on my first cardboard here, but all I did was took my signature, and I can see where my holes are poked on my signature, and then I just took my T-pen and made a hole in each spot on my cardboard, right where I would need to stitch or poke my hole for stitching. So what's nice about that then is I can take my T-pen and I can open up that hole with my T-pen, and then what I did is I took my needle and I very carefully fed it through. Now I'm going to do that on my other cardboard so you can see. This is nice and easy because I already threaded my needle through there. So what I'm going to do then is I'm using the purple side of my mat board here. This is just scrap mat board. So I'm going to put the insides together and then do the same thing that I take. You can take a pencil. I just like to take my T-pen, poke that right in the middle there, and then I can take and poke my holes with my T-pen. So that is going to line up then. You can see I'm wiggling my T-pen around to make that hole larger. And this is going to line up then with the holes that I have poked on my front cardboard, on my cover. So my back and my cover should line up after I poke these holes. So just using my T-pen, making those holes a little larger. And that's what's nice about this book, is that there is no gluing. I don't have to worry about waiting for the cover and spine and back to dry before I put the signatures in. So now I'm going to take my needle here and I'm going to just kind of twist and wiggle it through. You know, they are plastic, so they might want to break. So we're going to hold it really, really high up here so that we don't have to worry about bending or breaking the needle. Bending is okay, breaking is not. You need a needle to stitch your book together. All right, just kind of wiggling that through, making sure that my needle can fit through all 4 of those holes, because I'm going to use that when I'm stitching on my cover, so you can see all the way through. And these will kind of lay down after we stitch things together. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our first measuring our string, and I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 signatures. All right, so I have 7 signatures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure my thread 2 times the amount of signatures that I have. So, or 2 plus the amount of signatures I have, 2 plus. So that means I'm going to measure the width of my book here, and I have 7 signatures, so that means I'm going to measure it 9 times. And definitely give yourself a little extra room. You don't have to be really precise with this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then I can go ahead and cut that off. And then I'm going to thread my needle. And I'm not going to tie any knots. Okay, so that's really important. We don't want any knots on here because it's going to rip our holes a little bit bigger. So we are going to start with the first signature and our cover. So we are going to start on the inside. So I'm just going to put this off to the side here. We are going to start on the inside of our first signature, and it doesn't matter what side. And you're going to go ahead and pull that through, and you're going to leave a little tail inside, so probably about like that much. And then what you're going to do is, since this is the cover, I'm going to come up and over and around so that my needle is going to go back towards the signature here. And you want to be careful not to pull too tight, otherwise you'll just pull your thread through, and you don't want to do that. So you are going to pull it so that it comes around the top there, just like that. And then you're going to go back through the same hole that you just came out of, back into the center of your signature. So if you need to, you can put your book down, making sure that your needle goes through all of the papers here, and pulling that. And you want it taut, but you don't want it too tight that there isn't wiggle room here. This is a little too loose right now, but you are going to keep it nice and taut. So on the inside here, I'm going to tie these 2 together so that they don't slip apart. And then I'm going to come to the next hole inside, and I'm going to work my way outside. So coming through the top of my signature, pulling it nice and tight. And I'm going to do that same process that I did over here now on this hole. So I'm coming over the top, back towards my signature, and you're going to go back through that same hole that you just came out of. So sometimes I like to hold it like a tent like this, and then I can just feel, careful if you have a pokey needle not to poke yourself, that the needle came through. And then I can pull it to the inside here. All right, so nice and taut again. And you can see it's connecting my dots on the inside. So I come down next door, coming out the neighbor's house. I'm going to jump over their roof. All right, and I'm climbing back through their window. And I'm going to go right back in that same hole that I just came out of. So like Santa Claus, I'm coming down the chimney. And I'm back on the inside here. So again, pulling it nice and taut. Not too tight that you're ripping your paper either. And then you're going to come down to the end of the block here. All right, and this is what I always tell my students too. Stranger danger! When you're at the end of the block, you don't want to go back in the same hole that you just came out of. There we go. All right, what you're going to do when you come to the end of the block like this is that you're going to add your next signature. So bringing that down and around, all of this is nice and taut. Stranger danger, don't go back in that house. You're going to take your next signature and you're going to line it up. So the first thing you're going to do is check to make sure that your holes line up. And then I like to hold it like a tent because then I can see the holes that I'm going into, and then I can feel with my fingers on the inside. My thread has a tendency to get tangled when I'm flipping it back and forth. So I like to hold it like this. And then I can feel my needle. So what I'm doing is dragging it on the inside, and then it's poking out on the outside there like that. So what I'm going to do now is something called the kettle stitch. So, and you can go in this direction or in this direction, whatever direction you like. But all you're going to do then is go underneath the thread that connects the previous two signatures or the cover. This is where a curved needle would be really nice. And then I go back into that same hole that I just came out of. And of course my thread gets tangled anyway. And you can see this little thread here is wrapping around the previous thread. So anytime I'm inside, I want to come outside, come to the neighbor's house, come outside. And anytime I'm outside, I'm going to go underneath that piece of thread called the kettle stitch. And I'm going to go back in the same hole that I just came out of. So we're wrapping that thread around the thread of the previous signature. So back in that same hole. What's nice about the plastic needles too is that with the sharp needles, I have a tendency to stitch through my thread. And when that happens, you can't pull anything nice and tight. So with plastic needles, it's a little impossible to do that. All right, so I'm coming out at the end of the block. And remember, stranger danger, don't go back in that hole. All right, so I'm going to come out the end. And again, you can go around that thread either way. And when you come around doing this last kettle stitch, you're going to add your next signature. And I'm going to make sure that my holes line up. So that's my first and foremost. I like to hold it like a tent again. So I'm in the middle of my signature and I'm going to come right into the third signature, making sure I get through to the inside. And sometimes that's a little hard to get your papers lined up. And of course, best laid plans. They don't always line up. There we go. All right. So now I can do that same pattern with this third signature. I'm going to do this with all of the signatures until I get to the last one, and then it's kind of the same thing. Coming inside, coming out the neighbor's house next door here, right there. And this is going to then wrap around the thread between the first and second signature now. So anytime you are stitching, you are going to make sure that you're going underneath the previous two signatures. Sometimes you lose your needle. There we go. Previous 2 signatures. Doing that kettle stitch to lock that in place. And then you just go back into that same hole that you just came out of. So this is the exact same procedure, the exact same pattern for all of the stitching for all of the rest of the signatures. So if this is it, I could then add my back cover, but I have more signatures to add. So you just come out the neighbor's house, you do your kettle stitch beneath the thread of the previous 2 signatures. If you have a curved needle, oh, they're so nice. Go back into that same hole that you just came out of. And then when you come to the end of the block, you're going to do your last kettle stitch. And stranger danger, don't go in that hole. Stay outside, because when you're outside, now I can add my next signature. And so adding the next signature, it's the exact same pattern. I'm going to hold my signature like a tent. Go in at the end of the block, that's the safety house. And once inside, I can come out the neighbor's house next door, and I'm going to go underneath the thread that's connecting the previous 2 signatures. And sometimes you lose your needle in there. That's what's nice about holding it like a tent, is I can kind of get my fingers up in there and work it out. And then I'm going to go back in that same hole that I just came out of. Moving on down the block to the neighbor's house. Going underneath the thread that connects the 2 previous signatures. Sometimes, there we go, I can push my needle down and grab the top like that. Back into that same hole that we just came out of. And then coming out at the end of the block, doing our last kettle stitch between the previous 2 signatures, and you are ready to add your next signature. So you can see it's starting to almost kind of look like a braid as it develops here. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up a little bit, and I'm going to add the next signatures, and I'll meet you back to show you how to put the cover on, the back cover. So now we have all of our signatures are stitched together, so we are ready to put on our back cover. So we're going to do the exact same way that we did it to the front cover. So inside every one of your signatures, you should notice that there are lines connecting each one of your holes. This signature is going to have double because it has the connection that we had to the previous signature, as well as connecting the back cover here. So we are going to go over the top, and we're going to come back through the hole towards the signatures. And when you do that, again, make sure it's taut. You're going to go inside the signature now. So back inside the hole that we just came out of. So I'm going to make sure that I'm making it through to the inside here. And you are going to, oops, I'm losing my thread here, go out the hole next door, coming out the top of your signature, pulling that nice and taut. And if you run out of thread, this is a really nice, easy stitch to add to, so you don't have to worry about that, because you want to add your thread on the inside, and it looks like I might need that. So definitely be generous when you're cutting your thread. So over the top, back towards the signature, inside the hole that you just came out of. So actually I'm going to show you how to do that, how to add thread. All right, so I'm inside here, and I probably could go to the next one and over the top here, but I'm just going to grab another piece of thread and cut this, because it's always better to have more than less. So on the inside here, all I need to do is tie the two together and a nice tight knot. And you can double your knot if you want to. And then you can kind of trim your ends a little bit. I would not cut them really tight unless you plan on putting a little bit of glue on your knot so that it doesn't come undone. So you can just leave that tucked on the inside there. So that's really easy how to add thread to your signature so that you have enough to finish your book, or if you run out in the middle. So again, coming next door here, out the neighbor's house, right out the top of that signature, coming over and around your back cover, back towards that signature. All right, pulling it taut, but not too tight that it doesn't relax. Back into that same hole that we just came out of. Coming out the neighbor's house at the end of the block. And this is where you are going to go back into that same hole. So I came out the top there, and I'm going to come up and over my back cover, and this one we're not adding anything, so what we want to make sure is that we tie off inside. So I am going to go back in that hole at the end of the block because I'm not adding any signature. So I'll show you how to tie that off inside here. So pulling my thread through, and I can slip underneath here. And I have this loop here, so I can stitch back through that loop. And what it's going to do is going to tie a knot right around there. And I'm going to do this a second time, so I don't even need my needle for this because I can just tuck my thread underneath there. And here's my loop. So I'm going to take the end of my thread here and tie off that knot. And I can go ahead and clip my thread there. And then I have my Coptic stitch sketchbook ready for creativity exercises, practicing my daily creativity so that I don't lose that good problem-solving skill set.